Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another HRO Today educational podcast. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today Magazine, HRO Today EMEA, HRO Today APAC, and we produce the HRO Today forums and educational events held around the world, as well as manage the HRO Today Association. Today, we're going to be talking about healthcare and specifically healthcare recruiting, and more specifically, RPO in healthcare. The healthcare industry, as everyone knows, is facing a critical shortage of nurses and other allied health professionals, making recruitment, workforce planning more challenging than ever. In this podcast, we're going to delve into how recruitment process outsourcing, or RPO, is transforming nurse recruitment. We'll explore some innovative strategies, discuss the unique challenges of the nursing workforce, and we're going to talk about how the data-driven solutions, and this is the more modern world we live in now where data is driving everything, but how these data-driven solutions are addressing workforce shortages and improving hiring efficiency. Now, whether you're in healthcare administration, recruitment, or just interested in understanding how the dynamics of healthcare staffing work, this podcast is going to give you some valuable insights into the role of RPO in shaping the future of nursing. Now, let's talk about the healthcare industry and then the RPO industry that services healthcare. A lot of the providers recently have been pulling back, the RPO providers, from healthcare. They've been diminishing their investments in RPO or downright shutting down some of their RPO operations. I'm not going to mention any of these legacy providers, but for the HR executives in the healthcare industry listening to this podcast, you know whom I'm speaking of. Yet, Korn Ferry has gone the other way. They are dramatically investing and building their healthcare RPO staffing business. And in fact, they've been doing this for several years, and they're dramatically expanding their footprint and the number of deals they're servicing in the healthcare space here in North America. So we thought we'd ask them what they're doing differently and why their innovative approaches are actually working and what we can learn from that. With us today, we have Liz Bickley, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Korn Ferry Health, or KF Health. She is a veteran of more than 20 years of healthcare staffing, working for firms such as CLO Talent and HCL. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elliot. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, Liz, Korn Ferry is a top-rated provider in RPO in the global level and also across multiple sectors of the economy. They also do consulting. They do all kinds of organizational development work. They do executive search, of course, as well as RPO, and highly rated provider by HRO Today on the RPO Baker's Dozen for every year since we started doing it. Anything else about Korn Ferry specifically or KF Health that you want our audience to know before I start asking you really, really hard questions?
I think I would just add, Elliot, as you mentioned, we have been a player in this space for a very long time and incredibly successful. We have refocused our efforts in the last couple of years on the healthcare space. And as you mentioned, not a new space to me, a space I've been in for over 20 years. And I think our focus has really been to pull together that depth and breadth of broader Korn Ferry capability to really help healthcare organizations solve root cause issues. As you and I have discussed in the past, my belief is that RPO in its original form no longer serves particularly that industry sector, and to really help those think differently about the services and solutions that we provide. So look forward to sharing a little bit more about that.
Well, great. Let me start off by talking about the current landscape. All right. So nursing shortage, nothing new. It's been a longstanding challenge. Now, how is that shortage impacting recruitment strategies, and what unique hurdles do RPO providers or internal TA for that matter face when addressing these shortages?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the nursing shortage is one of the most acknowledged and significant challenges in healthcare, driven by all of the factors that we talk about commonly, whether that's aging population and the huge amount of nurses that are moving towards retirement, increased demand for services, nurse burnout that we still hear about as being incredibly prevalent, even access to new nurses to move into the education system are just causing competitive hiring environment where traditional methods just can't keep up. For RPO providers, the challenge isn't just around filling positions, it's about understanding more deeply the organizations that they're supporting and being able to deliver scalable and flexible solutions that go way beyond transactional hiring. There are limited talent pools, there are high turnover rates, there's a constant demand for specialized skills. And certainly from Korn Ferry's perspective, we've had to pivot recruitment strategies to be much more proactive, tapping into passive talent, using analytics, and focusing on building those longer term pipelines to really support the organizations. I think in addition to these long-standing challenges, what we're really seeing as we get deeper within the healthcare organizations that we support is that there is a huge push and pull between finance, between nursing, and between human resources. For example, finance, of course, are very budget driven. They think in terms of FTEs. Nursing is much more focused on the patient. They're thinking about patient ratios. They're thinking about hours per patient day. They're looking at quality indicators. And then HR and TA often come in thinking about headcount, right fit, right experience, etc. And so the lack of alignment that really exists around these different concepts, budgeting, position controls, scheduling, creates this domino effect of not hiring the right talent that's needed for organizations. So that has been a big part of how we've shifted our thinking and how we partner. Turnover is another great example. Talent acquisition organizations feel like they're on this hamster wheel of filling one requisition, two more come in, and organizations, whilst they are feeling like they're making improvements from a retention perspective, still seem to sit in this churn. And what we're finding is that there are some real challenges there around movement within organizations, where a nurse is moving from full-time to part-time, where a nurse is perhaps moving from part-time to be per diem. So that from a finance perspective, as an organization looks at its workforce, it looks like we have the same amount of people, but they're not doing the same amount of work. So maybe just some examples there of some of what we're seeing shifting and some of how we're addressing that workforce need a little bit more holistically.
It's interesting. There's a few things which everyone can agree upon, and one of them is the data, right? They also can agree, finance, administration, and the HR groups, on accreditation standards have to be maintained, which does drive things like, nurse ratios, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the frustrations, I think, for the HR people, because finance, et cetera, may see the world differently, but they all agree on certain core principles. I'm going to add, I'm not going to ask you to comment to it, but one more aspect of what we can throw into the mix is, at least here in North America, immigration policy is still unclear. So while there's been a crackdown on what, some call illegal immigration, there is still some lack of clarity about how much the immigration system is going to change to allow nursing professionals from other countries to enter, and how quickly those can be processed in. So that's something, I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of the systems that you're working with. That is a current question about, because one of the big talent pools is to bring in educated professionals from other geographies, and that's got to be sort of sorted out. Let's talk about some of the innovative recruitment strategies that you've engaged in. So can you share some of those innovative or data-driven approaches, knowing what the problems are that we just discussed? What are the approaches that RPO providers are doing to attract and retain, since you mentioned that's an issue, and engage the nursing talent in such a competitive workforce market?
So I think we talked a little bit already about data and about some of the discrepancies. I think our work often starts with helping an organization understand their data. So to your point, we know that many now are data rich, but still often insight poor. So we work with our clients to really help them understand implications of their current and future workforce needs, as well as then really layering in our data driven by our KF Insights team, related to market trends, really looking at some of the skills of the future and driving towards ultimately their strategic and operational plans really helps us anticipate workforce needs sooner, identify where those talent gaps are, and then create those hyper-targeted recruitment campaigns. The power of us really understanding both the internal and the external workforce drivers allows us to understand the availability of talent. And then within, of course, we talk a lot about the 5 different generations in a workforce, understand their specific talent preferences. We have to be able to sell a realistic bill of goods to a candidate to ensure that it's going to be a good fit, to really look at will they stay. And this is where often we augment our RPO work with much broader, deeper employee value proposition work. Healthcare, again, I think overall did a really good job in the last 10 years of thinking about EVP and actioning it. But for many, we've since come through a pandemic. Those generational shifts have become more extreme. And we're really often working with organizations to say, this is a point in time where we have to relook at this. Many of these healthcare organizations, as they look at their workforce, many times their current workforce has been with them, the vast majority, for less than 5 years. So that value proposition work has become more and more important again, because what got us here isn't going to get us there. And that opportunity to really understand your workforce today and their drivers can really impact not just how we attract talent, but to your point, Elliot, how we retain that talent. Beyond the EVP, candidate experience is a big focus of a lot of the work that we are doing. Nurses want more than a job. They're looking for meaningful work. They're looking for career growth, and they're looking for flexibility. And enhancing engagement with personalized outreach, leveraging technology for virtual hiring events, really driving deeper conversation around career pathing initiatives to attract that talent is a big part of the work that we're doing. In addition to, of course, leveraging all of the great tools that are coming to play. AI-driven sourcing has been a huge game changer for us. We're really able to sift through resumes at an extreme volume to look for those best skills, to look for matches around experience and culture, and allowing us to certainly speed up the process, but more importantly, improving that hiring accuracy and focusing on quality and likely indicators of retention.
Liz, do you find, just in follow, before we move on to what the future is, do you find that sometimes these internal TA teams, I mean, you're in an uber competitive market space, they just don't have the tools or the technology or the budget to acquire those tools and technology that your Korn Ferry Insights team takes for granted, right? Not only the stuff that you've developed that's proprietary, but even the tools that you just use on a daily basis. If they're going to be in this uber competitive market, and should they also be looking to an RPO partner for that tech stack? Because to be competitive, you're just not going to be able to win without it. I mean, how much of the value proposition, and they always think about it in terms of quality of the recruiters, and they can argue our recruiters are better than your recruiters, and my dad's tougher than your dad, or whatever they want to argue, but you have a relatively enormous budget for testing tools, for trying tools. They don't. How important is that to the value proposition of RPO in a very competitive market space?
I think it's a huge component, Elliot, and I think still underrepresented. As you mentioned, there have certainly been many players in the healthcare industry space, many of whom have done great work from an RPO perspective, many of who have used that tagline, but not to its truest form. So RPO, I think, is still a concept that we are developing within the industry, and we're developing what it should mean at its heart, and it should mean more than just people with bodies. So the technology components, those analytics and insights components, make up a huge amount of the value that an organization is going to get. And so when we're working with organizations to build the business case, we want to demonstrate through ROI, not just from a people perspective, but from a technology and a results perspective. And I agree, I think it is still not talked about enough. It would never make sense for these organizations to invest in the types of technology and capability that we bring to play in our partnerships, and that they get get to benefit from year on year, even when organizations do invest in that technology. As you know better than anybody, tomorrow that technology is already out of date. That continuous investment and innovation is what is needed to remain on the front edge of talent acquisition.
Well, let's talk about that. Front edge is the future, right? So let's talk about what the future is. As you look ahead, how do you see the role of RPO evolving, particularly when it comes to nurse and allied health recruiting? What are the trends and technologies that you believe will have the biggest impact on the industry in the next 5 years? I mean, you mentioned AI, and you can certainly expand on that, but what else do you think, in terms of trends and technologies that are really going to drive the next 5 years that you, as the Chief Operating Officer of Korn Ferry Health, are focused on?
Yeah, I think the future of nurse, but also healthcare recruiting is evolving rapidly, where I see a much stronger emphasis is really on that workforce redesign and some of the capability that we bring to the table around that, really looking at that combination of what does an organization need to serve its patients, thinking differently about shifts and scheduling and full-time and part-time workforce strategies, really pulling together one recruiting strategy that is allowing organizations to have the right mix of talent that represents also the availability of talent in the marketplace. A real refinement and focus on demand and operational workforce planning, partnering to put the right methodologies, processes, and technology in place to think differently about position control, and the feed in there of the creation of balanced schedules to really drive the accuracy of the recruitment teams to make sure that they are going out and finding the right talent. I think additionally, this whole concept that we talked about in terms of nurses really looking for career pathways, career ladders, career rock walls. We're seeing much more of our time spent on helping organizations think about that workforce differently. How are you bringing somebody into the organization that understands immediately where their role could be, not just today, but in 2 years, in 5 years, and create collaboratively their journey within an organization? There is really no reason for many of these healthcare organizations that nurses can't create that journey of a lifetime that really allows them to continue to grow and develop and try new things at different points in their life. We continue to see the opportunity around upskilling and reskilling. We've talked, I know in the past, Elliot, about skills first within healthcare, and we are seeing those shifts around the care delivery model. Where do we use different skills in different ways to allow us to not need to hire perhaps as many nurses as we need to today because they are supported in different ways? And I think that RPO organizations have a role to play in that space, really partnering and helping understand what are the training programs, how does internal mobility become a really important part of the work that we do and just as valuable as hiring externally. And then ultimately, I think, as you've mentioned, of course, in the next 5 years, we're going to continue to see technologies that are enabling our teams in different ways, that are driving experience and a candidate-centric experience more now than ever. Organizations have to invest in innovation and adaptability, and healthcare have long been a little bit of a lagger in this space, but we're really seeing much more innovation and willingness to test new things and try new things. And we're really excited to be leading that journey with many of the clients that we support.
And obviously, there's got to be evolution. You can't keep doing things the same way over and over. And if they're not working great, continue to do them. So we need to continue this conversation, Liz. We're out of time, but this has been very interesting and fascinating. It's one of the largest components of the U.S. economy is the healthcare sector. And there are definitely shortages and there are definitely issues that have to be addressed. Sounds like you guys have some very innovative approaches and are really expanding your operations in that respect. For our, audience, listeners, You need to think about your tech stack. You need to think about your talent. You need to think about the variability of your infrastructure because there are high and low seasons. But we will have Liz Bickley back to talk about some of those issues. I want to once again thank Liz Bickley, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Korn Ferry Health. Liz, thanks for taking part in the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we will have you back. So for all of you, thank you for your time and attention, and we'll look forward to having you join us on our next HRO Today educational podcast.